Traditionally, British politics has been pretty simple. In the red corner, you have the left-wing Labour Party. In the blue corner, the right-wing Conservative Party. But the game is changing. For months, the populist Reform UK Party has been punching high in the polls, forcing both main parties to rethink their strategies, especially when it comes to migration and crime. Within Labour's own camp is a group of MPs who think they have the knockout blow to transform not only the fortune of Keir Starmer's government, but the very nature of their party. And, just to confuse things even more, they're called Blue Labour. Our reporter, Tom Sullivan, brings us up to speed.
Back then, they were the future. Prime Minister Tony Blair had transformed Britain's Labour Party, ditching many socialist policies and taking it into the new millennium. It became known as New Labour. 3 decades on, Labour is in power again, but the party's popularity is plummeting in the polls. After 1 year in government, is Prime Minister Keir Starmer failing to be an heir to Blair? Forced by his own rebel MPs into a string of U-turns over welfare and tax policies, for months Labour has been polling second to Nigel Farage's populist Reform UK, a party that has only 4 MPs. And one Labour faction reportedly has a lot of sway, not New Labour, but Blue Labour.
We're pretty honoured to have first Socialist, first Labour. You're the author of Blue Labour. Why is Nigel Farage at Reform? And he tells me, he says, Bannon, the one guy you got to meet in the United Kingdom is Lord Glassman.
It was founded by Labour politician Lord Glassman in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis.
The Blue were two sides. The first of it felt like a very sad time, like Labour was exhausted, so that was Blue. And the other side were these values of family, place, work were considered by some in Labour to be Tory values. So I kind of phrased Blue Labour just as a provocation.
This small group of MPs believe the only way for Labour to win the next general election is for it to be more left-wing on economics, but more right-wing on social issues, like getting tougher on crime and immigration.
Labour are perfectly well aware that in the post-New Labour world, their relationship with the working class has been weakening. Brexit eventually has destroyed that relationship, and Starmer failed to in any way reinstall it.
But how much power does this small faction actually have? Very few MPs label themselves Blue Labour, and not everybody sees the right-wing Reform UK as the party's main rival.
Yes, it is true. Labour is losing some votes to Reform. About 1 in 10 of the people who voted Labour last year are currently saying that they will vote for Reform. And Reform were not a problem for Labour last year. But Labour are losing more votes to the Liberal Democrats and the Greens at the moment than they are losing to Reform.
Starmer's predecessor as Labour leader, the left-wing firebrand Jeremy Corbyn, is planning to launch his own party, and hypothetical polling suggests it could split the left-wing vote. Downing Street says Keir Starmer is getting on with the day job, fixing the foundations of government.
Morning.
He'll also need to cement the different factions within Labour before the cracks grow wider.
Joining me now is Jonathan Brash, Labour MP for Hartlepool and part of the Blue Labour group in the House of Commons. Jonathan, welcome to Westminster Watch. Now, when I'm on the parliamentary estate, I ask people, I said, tell me about Blue Labour, because there is a lot of media noise out there about Blue Labour. But I get very differing answers. So perhaps as a member of that group, you could just tell me, what is Blue Labour?
Yeah, well, fundamentally to me, Blue Labour is an economic ideology that's very focused on place and geography. You know, we live in a country where there are parts of our nation that have been left behind for the last 30 years, places where deindustrialisation just left behind, places like I represent, working class communities. You know, the blue in Blue Labour for me always means blue collar. And I think that we advocate very strongly for a proper rebalancing of our nation, where those parts of the country that actually built the UK, actually built our country, drove our economic fortunes in the past, need to drive our economic fortunes in the future. And so reindustrialisation is really at the heart of what I believe the Blue Labour agenda is about. Now, don't get me wrong, there are other facets to it. People will talk about social conservatism and various other things. I take a very strong view that the Treasury orthodoxy, that it's cheaper to import an employee than train one here, is wrong, and it's been the wrong ideology, the globalist ideology for 30 years now, and that we have to focus on our local communities that we represent and ensure that they've got the opportunities and skills to build the country once again.
But to some people, they will say, this is just about winning the red wall back. It's about going after, if you like, an ideal of working class voters. Is it a tactic to make the party appeal and ensure that you continue to win in the north?
Well, in reality, I think that's somewhat splitting hairs in some respects, because if we are going to win again in the red wall, as we did in 2024, we'll only do it because we reflect the desires, the aims, the ambitions of the people who live there. And that's what we've got to do. So in answer, is it about doing what people in those areas want? Absolutely it is. But that's about enriching their lives and hoping that they will continue with us in the future, of course. But first and foremost, they've got to want it. And I believe that that's exactly what they do want.
So is it a case of Blue Labour being the answer to Reform UK?
Well, look, I think Reform UK are the current iteration of something that has existed in my part of the world and other red wall constituencies for many years. I remember when UKIP were the great threat, and then the Brexit Party were the great threat, and then Boris Johnson's iteration of the Conservative Party was the great threat, and Reform were the latest version of that. I think none of them ever answered the question about what those voters wanted. None of them ever delivered.
We spoke to Professor John Curtis for this programme as well, and he said that actually at the moment, according to polling, 1 in 10 of previous Labour voters are going to Reform, and that actually the agenda, if you like, that you've been putting forward on crime, on immigration, might appeal to those voters, but it could come at the price of more socially liberal voters going back to the Greens or going to the Liberal Democrats, who are winning more Labour voters in more numbers than Reform. Are you actually misjudging, if you like, where the Labour vote is?
Well, I think you can only make these decisions based on the conversations that you have as a constituent MP. I speak every single day to people from Hartlepool. I talk about what they want for their area, and they tell me they want jobs. They want an aspirational future for their children. They want their public services fixed. They want their streets to be safe. A lot of it comes down to a very simple word for me, which is security. Too many people in constituencies like mine live insecure lives. Might be insecure in terms of their personal safety and crime and antisocial behaviour. Might be economic insecurity. It might be insecurity in their home for a variety of different reasons. We have to fix those problems. So I'm less focused on the left, right, liberal, Reform, whoever it is that happens to be making an argument, and much more focused on reflecting what I think my voters want. And for me, that is best reflected in the traditions of Labour, and more specifically Blue Labour.
But are you saying the Labour Party that is governing is not doing that, and that's why there's a need for Blue Labour?
I think that in any governing party, you need backbench MPs to push the ministers to go in the direction that you think is best. It's been the tradition of every governing party in a parliamentary system going back as long as you can think. And for me, actually, I think a huge amount of what this government is doing is setting up the Blue Labour agenda perfectly. Look at the industrial strategy, place-based, the idea of making our country an industrial heartland once again, a huge thing. The skills agenda that's DFE are pushing around Skills England to make sure that we have the skills we need in our communities, and that our schools and colleges are funded to the point where local people can get the jobs that they want going forward. These are all part of the Blue Labour agenda. What we have to do, and what our job as parliamentarians is to make sure that pressure is kept up so that we deliver on these promises, that the plans that the Labour government has put in place in its first year come to fruition and deliver for the people that we represent.
Do you think your existence, though, is actually and your very vocal presence is actually damaging the government, the Labour government?
No, I don't at all. I absolutely don't. And I think that a mature political party. I think a mature government is one that listens to its parliamentarians, listens to the different arguments and makes choices based on the arguments that are made. I think it enriches the Labour Party to have a wide range of voices from all different parts of it. You know, that's what governing is truly about. It's not about shouting at each other, it's about talking to each other, listening to each other and pressing your case for your constituents.
Very interesting, the language that we get from very much from your founder, Maurice Glassman, and yourselves, and in publications. You talk about work, you talk about community, you talk about tradition, faith, flag. You could be members of the Conservative Party, couldn't you?
No, I don't think so, because actually, if you look at the difference between, as I said before, Boris Johnson's diagnosis of the problem was correct. He recognised that there were parts of this country that had been left behind for far too long. But the solution was to hand out competitive pots of money, to do up a shopping centre, to build a bridge, to make a hotel look nice. That's not giving the levers of power to parts of this country that used to be the engine room of the British economy. So what I think we believe in is not token handouts from central government, is actually genuinely giving the power to those communities to decide their own future. And I think that's quite a different vision from the one of the Conservatives.
Some of members of Blue Labour talk about you've got to read the way of the world as it is now. Do you take inspiration from other governments, other politics from around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll lay my cards on the table. I think you might be alluding to it. I think it's perfectly clear why someone like Donald Trump won states like Pennsylvania, working class, blue collar communities, because you can argue again whether he's getting the solution right, but he recognised that visceral anger in those working class communities, that globalisation, that a world that wants to find the cheapest labour wherever it is and bring it to your country in order to undermine and undercut the workforce that you've got there, left communities devastated. And we can no longer tolerate that. It's not good for the constituencies that I represent. So I can see absolutely in some of the protectionist talk, the anti-globalist talk of someone like Donald Trump, I can absolutely see why that appeals to working class voters, and actually why we've got to think very carefully about how we protect the communities we represent as well.
One final thought for you. We're talking about Blue Labour. Do you see a time, maybe by the end of this Parliament, is it maybe an overreach, that there'll be no need for Blue Labour and it can just be Labour?
Well, I will certainly say this, that if by the end of this Parliament our industrial strategy has delivered reindustrialisation to communities like mine, good, well-paid jobs, safe streets, opportunity for our young people, then we'll have achieved our mission.
Jonathan Brash, thanks very much indeed for joining us here on Westminster Watch. We heard there about how Blue Labour are positioning themselves, but let's see what some seasoned political commentators make of it all. I'm joined by former Labour Party advisor Scarlett MccGwire, deputy editor of Spectator magazine Freddy Gray, and columnist at The Independent Mary Dejevsky. Welcome to you all. Let me start with you, Scarlett. What did you make of some of the thoughts from Jonathan Brash there, our MP from Hartlepool?
I thought he sold Blue Labour very well, because he quite rightly talked about doing what you should be doing for your constituents. But the problem with Blue Labour is it's much broader than that, and it looks as though it's all the people are going to vote for Labour sort of live up north, and they're the ones who matter. And actually, and then I also feel on a social thing that they don't understand.
What do you mean social?
So if we talk about their views on women, on the so basically it's family, faith and flag. So the family obviously has two parents. Well, unfortunately we've moved on quite a bit from that. Faith is no longer Christian, although they are Christian. And I think patriotism, I am a patriot, but I wouldn't wrap myself in the flag. So I think that the basics of New Labour, you have to question.
Blue Labour,
you have to question. But what he said about doing the best for his constituents is what every constituency MP should be doing.
So Freddie, you've been around a while. How much influence do you think Blue Labour have in Labour Party government?
Well, it's interesting that we're tripping over the blue new Labour thing, because the problem with Blue Labour is not actually very new. And I remember in the Cameron years, we had red Toryism, which in many ways is the same thing as blue Labour. It's an attempt to go back to the working classes, to appeal to, as Scarlett says, flag, family, things that sound great and actually people really like. The trouble with it is that it doesn't seem to actually carry many votes. It interests the media, it interests us a lot. It seems like the exciting right thing in politics. But it never seems to establish much purchase within the parliamentary system at the moment, even though it taps into populist tides that are happening all over the world, which is the working classes feeling very left behind by the modern world, increasingly lower middle classes increasingly feeling that globalization, technology has left them behind. They're angry, they're in search of something, they're in search of identity. And Blue Labour promises that, but so far it hasn't really delivered it.
When you think of the comments Professor Curtis made to us, 1 in 10 of Labour voters are voting reform, and actually Blue Labour might be chasing the wrong audience because more people are going to the Greens. More Labour voters at the last election are going to the Liberal Democrats. Are they missing something here?
Well, I think it's getting so complicated, the whole complexion of British politics, that you're getting these shadings and people are changing their vote. You know, I think one of the most interesting things that's happened, maybe over the last couple of years even, is that class is said to have vanished from British politics to the extent that people no longer vote like their parents did or like they vote according to other preoccupations. And that helps to explain the rise of reform on the right, but it creates problems for Labour at the moment. Because it's in government and because it has such a huge majority, then the different shades of Labour then come out in the various votes on the various policies that Keir Starmer is putting forward as Prime Minister.
We are breaking, as Mary has suggested, into lots of more complicated political landscape. It's getting more European, isn't it? We're starting to see lots of different interests being represented by more parties than the usual Conservative and Labour. But we don't have a parliamentary system like they do in Europe. So where's this going to end?
Well, this is the question, isn't it? Because at the moment, Reform are saying the Tories are nowhere. We are the real opposition, even though I think at the moment they have four MPs, and the Tories do have over 100, but because of the polls. And what we don't know is whether the tectonic plates are really moving. But what is absolutely known is that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party and Kemi Badenoch and Tories are absolutely determined that there will not be proportional representation, that it will be first past the post. And as long as we have first past the post, that always favours the two large parties.
But Freddie, Blue Labour is all about trying to reach the red wall, if you like, and put together and firm up that vote that has traditionally been with Labour. They are not a breakaway or threatening to break away, are they? This is a party that's trying to carry influence to change the Labour Party's politics and presentation. Does it actually have any chance of success, do you think?
I don't think so in the Labour Party, unless they can have an honest and frank conversation about immigration, because a lot of what drives the appeal of Blue Labour is a sense that the England, the Scotland, the Wales we used to know have gone. And that's as a large result of massive immigration in the last few years and decades. And I think unless Labour are willing to talk frankly with the public about the harms of massive immigration, then they're going to keep finding voters go towards reform.
But is the Labour Party at odds with Blue Labour in the sense that, because they would tell you, I'm sure if you asked Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, she takes immigration really seriously. She wants to stop the boats.
Yeah.
So why does Blue Labour not have confidence that they're going to do it?
Well, because, Keir Starmer tried for a little bit. He tried a bit of flag embracing. He tried to be a sort of Blue Labour figure briefly at the last party conference before he was elected. And it doesn't really work because a lot of the heart of the parliamentary Labour Party is London-based, metropolitan in their values, and very, very alien to the sort of people that Blue Labour are trying to talk to, which is, of course, this red wall in the north, many of whom are now going towards reform.
But Freddie, I mean, a lot of working class people in the north are ethnic minorities. Their family come from immigrants, and
but
we
interestingly,
talk.
they also pine for a sense of community that they think has been lost.
No, they absolutely pine for a sense of community, and they don't want any more mass immigration. But we do talk as if up, in the north, that it's sort of all about white men, and I think this is one of the problems.
Did I say the word white? I didn't.
But Blue Labour isn't going to solve their problem, because there are other people, I mean, not just Reform, who are going to solve their problem for them. There are the independents who broke away from the Labour Party specifically on the migration question, but also on Middle East politics. And they are not going to vote for Blue Labour, they're going to vote for their independents.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, you said it's more of a European model for British politics. It's almost more of a Middle Eastern model for British politics.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you look at Israel, very small parties coalescing together at fractional moments, things like that, and religion, sectarianism, Islamic versus Christian versus secular, being very important parts of the debate, which we haven't had before.
Are we concluding, Miriam, that actually factions within a party have more or less influence than breakaway parties?
Well, we're going to see, aren't we? I mean, breakaway parties haven't had huge success in the UK. I mean, we've seen the SDP, and they looked as though they were, flavour of the year for a brief spell. And then they just sort of dissolved and basically went back into a centrist Liberal Democrat Party. I mean, I tend to think that the word faction is probably a better way of specifically describing Blue Labour, rather than, Reform, I think, can stand as a party. I actually think that this party that is mooted to be in creation, the Corbynite, the Jeremy
Sarah
Corbynite
and Jeremy
left,
Corbyn, yes.
If it ever happens, that actually has more of a future in British parliamentary politics than Blue Labour does, because I think that could stand as a party. I also think that come the time, risk a little bit of fortune telling, that it's possible that a future Labour Party could actually veer very much to the left and become much more of a classic Labour Party.
I want to go for a moment, if I may, international. Maurice Glassman, the founder of Blue Labour, way back in 2010, is enjoying a renaissance. Lots of people are talking to him.
Yeah.
He was at Trump's inauguration. He was the only political sort of figure really there, and was very much seemed to be drawing comparisons with Trump. How is Blue Labour modelling itself?
There's definitely some crossover there.
You were there, weren't you?
I was there. I saw Maurice Glassman, and he made me promise not to tell this story.
Which
but
you're going
then
to do, I hope.
I'm going to do it because he has since said it in interviews, so I think I'm allowed. But I saw him. I was on the balcony of this inauguration party. Maurice Glassman was there, and he said, something incredibly exciting just happened to me. I said, what's that? He said, Steve Bannon, the former chief advisor to Donald Trump, just came up to me, jabbed me in the chest and said, you, Maurice Glassman, are one of my heroes. And Maurice Glassman said, this is one of the most exciting moments of my life, which is an extraordinary crossover for a Labour peer to be saying that about Steve Bannon, the sort of, in many people's eyes, the sort of evil chief prophet of MAGA, Make America Great Again. I think there is obviously a crossover there. There's a attempt to speak to the angry, forgotten working classes that goes right across the Atlantic.
Final question for each of you, so make it brief. Are we entering an era, particularly over the next 4 years of this Parliament, where there's going to be more factions and or more breakaway parties?
I think that Labour and Tory have always been full of factions, and they're both very broad churches, and that's what makes them so good. Whether we then might have Reform on the right and whatever the new party is on the left, but but both the major parties will always be full of people thinking different things, which is healthy.
Scarlett has a point. I remember being inundated by lots of groups, didn't know what half of them did within the Conservative Party.
Yes.
More factions or more breakaway parties?
I think Scarlett's probably right, but I'm going to disagree just for the sake of it. Yes, the big British beasts of British politics, Labour and the Conservatives, have always managed to amalgamate, adapt to new forces in politics. But I do think at the moment they are looking particularly stale and rotten. And I think probably only the arrival of a new party, probably Reform, will break that open.
Mary?
I tend to agree, but that's, I think, more wishful thinking. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to happen. That is the proliferation of smaller parties, because there's no match in the electoral system. And I think unless the electoral system changes, you're not going to get a wider selection of parties represented in Parliament. And I think that's bad. I think that's bad for British politics, and I think it's bad for national morale in many ways.
Mary Dejevsky, Freddy Gray and Scarlett MccGwire, thanks for joining me here on the sofa at Westminster Watch. Indeed, thanks again to all my guests for joining me, and don't forget to connect with us on X at Westminster TRT. But for now, from me and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.